When it comes to replacing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson at safety, Howie Roseman cannot wing it like he did in 2023. I'll give you my best safety options for the offseason coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Wednesday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. The Philadelphia Eagles have a player to replace this offseason, a hole on their roster that I don't think most of us anticipated they would have to fill heading into the offseason. And that, of course, is at safety, with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson getting traded yesterday to the Houston Texans. They also sent a 6th-round pick to Houston for what's going to be a right guard in Kenyon Green. Plays left guard the majority of his career in Houston, but he's going to be a right guard for the Eagles, and a 5th-round pick in 2026. You guys know, if you listened to my bonus show yesterday, I'm not happy with the deal. Look, yes, we know after hearing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson talk on his live stream that it sounded like he wanted a new contract, he wanted a raise, and the Eagles were just not willing to give it to him. He understood they had to pay young players like Jalen Carter and Cam Jurgens, Reed Blankenship, and he just wanted to play for a contender, and he was sent to one with the Houston Texans. So I understand that. I get that if he was not going to play on his current contract, which was underpaying him, like to defend Chauncey Gardner-Johnson like I did after 2022, he outplayed his contract this year, and he deserves a raise. But Philadelphia, again, they have to pay so many players that he wasn't going to get one here. If that was going to make him cause issues this season where he was going to be happy playing on this deal, he might hold out, then I understand the trade. However, if he was willing to play one more year on this contract, you guys know I would have much rather had a 1-year rental of Chauncey, considering how important I think he is to this defense. I clearly value him and his role more than the Eagles do, Vic Fangio does. I personally would have kept him over getting a 5th-round pick back in Kenyon Green and sending a 6th-rounder in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I think the Eagles see it as, we trust Vic Fangio a lot. Like, Howie Roseman really does trust Vic to fill this void. They have some belief in Sidney Brown. There are options in free agency and the draft that could be cheaper. They even went in on a small push for Justin Reed, the Chiefs safety that is now in New Orleans. So I think they saw that as a better alternative to paying Chauncey. And also, they probably saw it as, if we're going to have a rental, we'd rather have it be at an important position like right guard rather than safety. If we can turn Kenyon Green into this year's version of Mekhi Becton, that's more valuable than having what Chauncey's provided in 2022 and 2024. I disagree with that, but that is their logic. Regardless, he is gone. He's in Houston, and even if Sidney Brown is given a real chance to start, which I would like to see that, I love his physical traits. This was a high pick, a 3rd-rounder just 2 years ago. But even if he is given a chance to start, the Eagles are going to add another safety this year. They're either going to add competition through free agency, or I think with one of their first 3 draft picks, they'll add a safety. Because even if you want Sidney Brown to get a chance to compete, you'll want another guy to push him, because this isn't some slam dunk. And I think they're going to want to run more 3 safety sets this year, especially early on in the season when Nakobe Dean's out. Yeah, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. will play a lot of snaps with Oren Burks gone in Cincinnati, but I think they're going to want more 3 safety sets. So they're going to need to, I already wanted them to add another safety this offseason to play with Chauncey and with Reed, but now that Chauncey is in Houston, I think they absolutely should go in on adding a safety of real significance, whether it's through free agency, a trade, or through the draft. I have 5 options to replace CGJ that I think would make me feel a lot better about this position. That a lot of times Howie Roseman in the past he's been winging it with this position. He kind of figures it out on the fly. Even when he brought in Chauncey in 2022, it was a week before the regular season started. Like, it was on the fly. He missed out on Marcus Williams in free agency. He brought in Jaquaski Tart in June. That was a disaster of a move. and he went for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and it worked out. But very last-second things he does with safety. Kevin Byard was the same at the trade deadline in 2023. If he's going to be a little bit more proactive in filling this hole as opposed to 2023, as opposed to 2022, here are 5 options that I really like. Number 1 is a trade-up for Malaki Starks from Georgia. I think this is the number 1 option. Yes, I know you have to pay a lot of players on this roster. And I know that safety is a position that you can justify sacrificing when it comes to financials more so than other more important positions. But that doesn't mean, kind of like linebacker, kind of like running back, you completely ignore the position, that you don't invest any sort of top assets in it. I like the idea of, just because you're not willing to pay a safety like Chauncey, doesn't mean you're not willing to take a player in the first or second round like a Malaki Starks. Malaki Starks has everything you want, from speed to length to size, physicality, coverage ability. He has made some of the most insane interceptions that I've seen in college football. His vertical is incredible. I thought his pro day today was unreal. Malaki Starks is a player that went to Georgia, which of course Howie Roseman likes, and he plays a position that, although his talent warrants maybe a top 15, top 20 pick, he might fall down the board because he's a safety, and teams will value other positions. So will Malaki Starks fall to 32? Probably not. Although Daniel Jeremiah did have Malaki Starks as the Eagles' 32nd overall pick in his first mock draft of the offseason. Even if they make a small trade up into the 20s, I could totally see Howie doing that. And then you have 4 to 5 inexpensive years of safety play that hopefully is top tier. And that's probably what Howie wants. Again, that's the benefit of drafting for need at times. People say don't draft for need, but if you hit on it, then you can have 4 to 5 good years of play from that player at a position that you don't really want to pay. Or you're going to pay one player and maybe you don't want to pay 2 because they're going to extend Reed Blankenship's contract. Malaki Starks can be that long-term piece. And I think there is an option for trading up that would make a lot of sense. The Minnesota Vikings are picking, I think it's 24th overall. Don't quote me on that. They only have 4 draft picks this year. Maybe you make a trade up with a team like Minnesota, moving 7 or 8 spots up the board, and you go for a Malaki Starks. That would be my number 1 option. My second option would be another small trade up for another safety prospect. Let's say Malaki Starks goes just way too far up the board early in the first round. You guys have heard me mention his name a few times on this show. Nick Emenwari from South Carolina is a player that I love. Like, he's got the speed. He's 6'3". He's got a wingspan that is really, I think, ideal for this position. It's really enticing when it comes to like his matchups one-on-one with tight ends. Nick Emenwari is a player that you can play down in the box more if you'd like to try that, especially when you're a little bit lighter at linebacker the first half of the season. I think those are my 2 favorite options this offseason, is not adding a Justin Simmons type who said the other day he'd love to play for Vic Fangio and Christian Parker again, as he did in Denver. Again, Justin Simmons, like, that makes sense. He's number 5 on my list. Bringing in Justin Simmons as a 1-year rental. I'd much rather find this replacement through the draft, because the veterans that you bring in, Howie's not going to pay these guys, and I don't really want to go year by year by year by year at safety and linebacker. Like, I'm just getting sick of that strategy, and that's kind of what they've been doing. So if you're not willing to pay 2 safeties, fine. If you're not willing to pay even just 1 safety, a really good contract, then invest a significant resource in it through the draft so you got that guy long term. And maybe you will eventually see a player is worth paying. Maybe it's just not Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Maybe you thought he's a replaceable player, but a unique talent like Malaki Starks or Nick Emenwari, maybe those guys are worth paying. So those are my 2 favorite options. And honestly, my third favorite option is also through the draft. Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State. If we have any Nittany Lion fans listening to the show, and I know we do, Kevin Winston, if he didn't have a season-ending injury in 2023, his tape is unbelievable. This guy's sideline-to-sideline range, his coverage ability. Talk about wingspan. I mean, he is so interesting as a prospect. If he didn't get hurt this year, I think you could make the argument he's just as good as Malaki Starks. He might be the best safety prospect. If not, I'd maybe even put him ahead of Nick Emenwari, but the injury does hurt his stock a little bit. Drafting him on day 2, maybe you trade up with that second-round pick, I really like Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State, or even an Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, one of the best ball hawks in this draft class. In round 1 and round 2, this is a much better safety class than last year. There are 4 guys with Starks, Emin, Winston Jr., and Watts. Those 4 guys, I think, would make a lot of sense to pair with Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown in 2025. And then, like I said, I think the last 2 options that I don't hate the idea. Give Sidney Brown a full-time chance to start, like a legitimate shot. I like that idea a lot. I don't mind that. I'm a believer in Sidney Brown. And then number 5, sign somebody in free agency like a Justin Simmons or a Julian Blackmon from the Indianapolis Colts. I don't hate that idea as well. I would predict that's probably what the outcome's going to be. It's not going to be an early draft pick because they did target Justin Reed. They wanted to pay him, try to get him at a cheaper rate than what Chauncey would have cost. He ultimately chose more money to go with a worse team in New Orleans. But I think of the 5 options, 4 and 5 are most likely. It's giving Sidney Brown a chance to start, but you also bring in some veteran competition, and maybe you rotate through those guys at safety, and you use more 3 safety looks. So that's probably the plan. I would have just kept Chauncey this year. Unless he was going to hold out, I would have tried to make it work, incentivize the contract, add some more guarantees. I think he's more valuable than probably the Eagles do with Vic Fangio, with their belief in Sidney Brown, with the options out there for cheaper. I really hold CGJ in high regard. I think what he brought was unique and special to this defense. So I'm not a fan of the trade. I understand a lot of the logic to it in the long term, but I think you're worse off this year on defense without having that guy on your team. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. One thing is clear, though, about letting Chauncey Gardner-Johnson go and some rumors about other players. The Eagles are trying to save cash, and I think they're gearing up for a couple big things with their money. I'm going to tell you what those things are coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you today by Betterhelp Online Therapy. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, but with Betterhelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. We spend money on gym memberships and healthy food. Why not invest in our mental well-being as well? Therapy isn't just for tough times. It's a great tool for learning coping skills. And my big thing this year is setting boundaries. BetterHelp makes it easy to fit therapy into your schedule. Whether you're working, parenting, or always on the go, they will find you a licensed therapist suited to your schedule and your needs. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/lockedon. All right, so the Eagles are cutting costs. They know, like, even in this soft cap world where Jeffrey Lurie is paying a lot of money up front in the form of liquid cash so they can spread around these salary cap hits and pay more players than a lot of other teams, they still can't pay everyone. And that's why, like, you shouldn't be surprised Mekhi Becton's going to be leaving, as Adam Schefter said. You shouldn't be surprised that Josh Sweat is gone, Milton Williams, Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers. I'm a little bit shocked that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is gone, but ultimately you can still understand that long-term they have to prioritize where they're allocating their money, and they've got some big decisions coming up soon. They have some other players they have to prioritize over these players. You can understand it from that perspective because, again, the Eagles are paying more guys than the majority of the NFL because Jeffrey Lurie is so willing to front the bill so Howie Roseman can work his magic and, just keep kicking the cap hit down the road. But again, you can't pay 22 players. Part of this is just you're almost punished for being so good at your job. Like, you built such a perfect roster last year and they all played over expectation. Even the guys that you didn't think were going to be that good were that good, like a Zach Bond. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson outplayed his contract. Mekhi Becton outplayed his contract. Milton Williams, Josh Sweat. So many guys exceeded expectations that you're almost punished by that because then once they play like that, their market value goes up, especially when you're on the open market. So you can't pay 22 starters top 10 average salaries of their position. Like, it's just, even in a soft cap world, it's not like, you can't do it. So that's why I'm not upset by this. Like, we knew this was going to be the reality for the majority of these players. Now, am I upset that Chauncey's gone in a vacuum? Of course. Do I think if they don't pay Dallas Goedert, or if they don't keep him at least for this year, they're going a little bit too far in prioritizing the long term over the short term? Yes, because they do have this Super Bowl window where you're trying to run it back and win it all this year. And again, even if you're not going to pay those guys, I'm not saying pay these guys long-term contracts. I get why you wouldn't pay Chauncey. I get why you wouldn't pay Dallas Goedert. But unless these guys are going to hold out, I'd rather have a year rental of Chauncey or Dallas Goedert than have a 5th-round pick and quote-unquote get ahead of the disputes that are coming. So that's just where I'm at. But again, you can't pay everyone. And look, this team needs cash because, like we said, Jeffrey Lurie, he's paying a lot of liquid to keep these players around. And there are more deals that are coming that are going to cost him even more money. Like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, trading him doesn't open up a lot in the salary cap realm of things, but from a cash perspective, it does. The Eagles saved $8.3 million in cash, in just actual liquid money, not salary cap space, but actual money by letting Chauncey Gardner-Johnson go to Houston. That's cash spending is really important for Philly because, again, so many of these contracts are backloaded. You need cash up front to pay them these roster bonuses, these signing bonuses, so you can spread the cap hits around. So they're going to need that money because they're spending so much already on the offense and on defense now with a guy like Zach Bond. And they're going to be spending even more money on the defense coming up. Like, they have to prepare for that. That Jalen Carter contract is going to cost an insane amount of money. Like, Jalen Carter, look at what Myles Garrett got. He's getting $40 million a year. Look what Milton Williams got. A player that was really good in Philly last year. He's not Jalen Carter. And a lot of what Milton Williams was able to do last year is a direct result of Jalen Carter tracking the attention of the offensive line, his side, giving Milton Williams one-on-one easy mismatches. I shouldn't say easy, but mismatches, one-on-one looks. And he took advantage of it, but Jalen Carter deserves a lot of that credit. If Milton Williams is getting $26 million a year, Myles Garrett's getting $40 a year, what's Jalen Carter going to get next year? If he takes even another step in year 3, which I think he will, I mean, he was already incredible, one of the best players in football last year. I think he could be the best defense. There's a chance he's the best defensive lineman in football next year. That guy now commands almost quarterback money, like $40+ million a year. He's going to get over 30. He'll probably end up getting 35 to 40 in that range. So as much as I, in a vacuum, wish Chauncey Gardner-Johnson would stay, I would love to have Dallas Goedert long term. I do understand these tough head-over-heart decisions you have to make because you have to not only have this cash for all these players you're already spending on, but also the ones that you want to keep long-term that are more important to this core. Jalen Carter. Nolan Smith is going to need a new contract soon as well. He's heading into year 3. You'll get eventually, look what J.C. Horn just got in Carolina. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, yeah, they're only heading into year 2, but those contracts, when they come knocking, those are going to be huge deals. So, and even this offseason, they might want to pay Cam Jurgens. Like, they're going to want to keep Cam Jurgens long-term. Reed Blankenship. A part of not paying Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is that they probably feel like they can get Reed at a cheaper rate. He's going to want less money. They can get him at a cheaper rate. And what's the huge difference between Chauncey and Reed? I think Chauncey's a better player, but they clearly probably don't see that much of a drop-off, and they know that Blankenship has that leadership that they really covet. So they're going to want to pay Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, eventually Quinyon and Coop, and they're going to want to pay Reed Blankenship and Cam Jurgens. They're going to pay a majority of this roster, and Jeffrey Lurie is willing to do that. But again, the reality of the NFL is you just can't pay everybody, and so I think that's what they're preparing for. Is there are some future contracts that they're not going to want to let those guys go. And right now, even though they might value Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they might want Dallas Goedert. Who wouldn't want Milton Williams or Josh Sweat on your team? They just know if it's them versus these other guys coming up, they're going to choose these other guys. And I can respect that at least. Like, there's not a player that needs a new deal in the future that I would say you need to keep one of the guys that just left over that player. Outside of, I would keep Chauncey Gardner-Johnson over Reed Blankenship, but there's no other decision I'm saying Howie is prioritizing the wrong player. Howie is right to prioritize Cam Jurgens and Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith over Mekhi Becton, Josh Sweat, and Milton Williams. You know what I mean? So I think in that way they are doing the right thing. The Eagles finally did make a move today in free agency. They were the last team to make a UFA signing from outside their own organization, bringing in a running back. I'll tell you why I like the move coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you today by FanDuel. March Madness is here. I can't believe it, but it's already here. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them up with spreads, totals, and game props. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, Howie Roseman finally did something in the form of signing a free agent, not from his own team. Today, he agreed to a one-year contract with former Green Bay Packers running back A.J. Dillon. In 4 years with the Packers, missed 2024 with a neck injury, but he has been cleared to play in 2025. Before that, in 4 years, after being a second-round selection from Boston College, A.J. Dillon had 2,428 total rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns. He had 7 in 2022, which was a career high. He had 5 in 2021. He was 5th. When you combine those 4 years, he had the 5th highest third down conversion percentage of all running backs. So I don't think a great player. You know, I think he's pretty inefficient for the second-round talent he was supposed to be. He does have that neck injury. He could end up being a Rashad Penny that just doesn't play, is a healthy scratch. He gets cut. But at the same time, I like this move. It's a low-risk, high-reward type of signing that there's very little guaranteed money in this contract, and I like the style of player he is. I was saying for weeks now that I wanted to bring in a bigger body, more physical, power running style of running back to add to the backfield of Saquon Barkley and Will Shipley. Like, I think that's a nice kind of stylistic player to have. That's something the Eagles really don't have in this backfield. Even if A.J. Dillon is nothing more than just, I mean, look at those quads. I mean, between him and Saquon Barkley, if he's just a pusher, perfect. It'll be worth the money. Like, A.J. Dillon and Saquon Barkley pushing Jalen Hurts forward, it's going to be a cheat code. So that's going to be a little secret weapon the Eagles have. And they brought back BVS, Ben Van Sumeren, today on a one-year deal at fullback. So the Eagles' power running game, they bolstered that up today. And A.J. Dillon, again, I like adding that kind of player into the backfield. Actually is more of a receiver than people give him credit for as well. Throughout his career in Green Bay, he averaged over 9 yards a reception. So he does have some explosiveness if he is healthy. I like it. Will Shipley is that smaller, versatile, fast third down back. A.J. Dillon's a bigger body, physical, in between the numbers kind of run style, and he's a good pass blocker, too. PFF actually had him multiple times, multiple seasons as a top 10 graded pass blocker at the running back position. So, yeah, I mean, he might not be anything. He might be injured. He might be shot like Rashad Penny was, but there's pretty much no guaranteed money here. And if he does work out, this is a second-round talent that has, again, a unique style and frame that you don't have in this backfield to complement Saquon Barkley. And I think the backup running backs this year are going to be more important than they were last year because Saquon Barkley, the offense is still going to run through Saquon, but he is not going to get, I think, the historic usage rate that he had last year. I just don't think you can ask a player this age to make it through 2 full seasons, including deep playoff runs, with that kind of usage at running back. Like, I just don't think that's realistic. Will they reduce his touches by half, 70% this year? No, absolutely not. but he touched the football more than anybody in the NFL last year. I don't think that's going to be the case again with Saquon. I think they'll pass the football more, but I also do think they'll use their other running backs a little bit more. I think they're going to use Will Shipley this year more than they used Kenneth Gainwell last year, who, by the way, did sign a deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday, so it made adding another running back important. I think Will Shipley will be used more than Gainwell last year. I think A.J. Dillon will be used more than Shipley was last year. So I like the move. A.J. Dillon also from Philadelphia, by the way, so that's kind of a cool wrinkle to this as well. I think it's a good signing, and I think it rounds out your top three running backs. Like, I think this is a good running back room. Saquon Barkley, Will Shipley, A.J. Dillon, boom. That's what you head into the 2025 season with. It's crazy, though, that this was the first UFA move the Eagles made all offseason that didn't have to do with extending their own, because Zach Bond was clearly was actually that guy. But signing a UFA from another team, heading into today, Howie Roseman was the only guy, the only GM in football that had not made a signing in free agency. I don't think this will be it, though. Like, he brought in a running back, brought in A.J. Dillon on a one-year contract. I think you could probably expect them to bring in another safety, cornerback as well, with Darius Slay officially signing his deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers today. 1 year, $10 million. Isaiah Rodgers in Minnesota. I think it's, even though it's officially Keely Ringo's season, they could still add another guy. Maybe Asante Samuel Jr.'s market doesn't look as good as we initially thought. Maybe the same goes for like a Rasul Douglas. My guy Christian Fulton signed with the Chiefs, so he's off the board. But maybe there's a corner out there that they could sign. Maybe there's a trade. Again, there are players that we probably haven't even thought of that they could trade for. Nobody thought the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for Kenyon Green trade was coming. So maybe there's a trade coming. I don't think that the A.J. Dillon move is Howie Roseman's last move this week. I think we'll, on the podcast tomorrow or Friday, we'll have another signing or two or a trade or something to recap. So I think the lack of activity, I don't think that's going to continue for the rest of the week. But A.J. Dillon, like the move. Don't love it, but I like it. Again, low risk, high reward signing for a player that I actually wanted last year before they signed Saquon Barkley. If they were going to keep that committee-like approach in the backfield, I said A.J. Dillon was an interesting piece to bring in. So 1 year later, they get him in Philadelphia, and I like the move. I definitely like the move. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Got 2 more shows for you this week, so stay tuned on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you get us in audio form. Thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.